Welcome everybody to Startup Grind Barcelona. As you notice, I'm not having the best voice today. You have been listening to us or coming to our events for 7+ years already, but I have the voice of Lemmy from Motorhead today. So that guy over there. This is our event number. I don't even know what event have we got right now, because we have been doing so many events since we started doing the online version of Startup Grind Barcelona. Prior to the pandemic, we had done 74 physical events, actually in February 2020, and that's not something that we should be saying really, really loud. We hosted 2 of our best events, but sadly, because of the pandemic, we had to move to online. For a while, we were doing 2 events per week, actually. So that's why we leapfrogged from 74 events to 100+ in less than a year. For those not familiar with Startup Grind, I don't know where you have been hiding under in the last 7 years, because in Barcelona we have been doing this since February 2014. We have been hosting our monthly event, usually in Movistar Center in Plaza Catalunya here in Barcelona. We have been hosting tons of different entrepreneurs, investors, or innovators, disruptors, even some celebrities every now and then. And our events usually have got a part with an open mic. Our events have got a central part, which is a fireside chat, and then the networking, right? However, in the online version, we're only doing the fireside chats. And a couple of other things that you ought to know about Startup Grind is, first of all, is that we are the largest communities for entrepreneurs all around the world. We've got a very specific set of values. We believe in giving, not taking, in making friends, not making contacts, and helping others before helping yourselves. So if that's something that resonates with you and you don't have a Startup Grind chapter in your city, we're actively looking to open chapters everywhere else, right? The fact that we are in Moldova, Mauritius, Andorra, and Gibraltar isn't enough for us. We're hungry. We still want to expand to other cities. So if you want to start a chapter in your city, kindly drop us a line. The second thing, and most importantly, we are thinking about going back to physical events after the summer, right? You will hear from us. We're still deciding. We haven't gotten the green light from our venue yet, but we definitely want to go back. We have seen already 3 or 4 different events in Barcelona, like Fuck Up Nights or the ITNIC pitch nights on Thursdays, that they are already doing physical events. So we didn't want to be the first, but we definitely don't want to be the last. So keep checking our newsletter, subscribe to our newsletter, and we will let you know when we're back. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our speaker tonight, because if you're on Twitter, you're probably very familiar with him, Samuel Gil. He's a partner at JME Ventures. He's currently based in Madrid in his beautiful office. So welcome, Samuel. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
The fact that we're interviewing Samuel tonight is because out of the VCs, there's a ton of VCs out there, and we're going to be talking about this at length. There's a ton of VCs out there, but I think that you've got a very distinct way of managing your community, and perhaps that also has got an implication on your deal flow, right? What has been your strategy always to share that much amount of content, this culture of transparency and openness, and how does that have to do with your deal flow as a VC firm?
First of all, thanks a lot for saying that we are doing something different, right? In this world in which we actually sell a commodity, which is money, right? We all try to differentiate ourselves. In our case, actually what I'm going to tell you is a narrative that I'm going to fit in retrospective, because this is not something we've thought about right? So it just happened, and over time it has evolved, and it's more or less what you're seeing right now. But there's one thing. So we believe that when you invest in a company, there is a lot of information asymmetry. On one side, there are many things that we as investors don't know about the company, because it's very difficult, in a private company. There are many things that during our analysis we don't know. And on the other side, there are many things that the entrepreneur doesn't know about the investor, right? So I think in my case, with my newsletter, what I try to do is to let entrepreneurs get to know me as good as I can, right? So that they can imagine what's like to work with me. And that's why I share, the things I'm interested in, how I think that some things should be approached, that kind of stuff. So it's a way for me to close that information gap between an entrepreneur and an investor, right? So I'm trying to make myself more familiar to these guys and many other things, right? So for me, it's an incredible forcing function to learn new things. So because each week I try to come up with an interesting topic and cover it more or less with some rigor and some, some research behind. So for me, it's to have that deadline is an incredible, forcing function for me to keep learning. And also, yes, exactly what you said. So for us is we love people that build in the open, that learn in the open, and this is what we are trying to do. So we don't want to position ourselves like, experts or know-it-alls. We are learning exactly in the same way that the entrepreneurs are doing, right? And we want to make ourselves like really approachable. And I could speak more and more about this, but I believe those are the main things.
Okay, but you mentioned, if I got it correctly, that you didn't have a strategy for this because you sort of learned it along the way that this was working for you. But now, do you have currently, at present, do you have a strategy for it now?
Yeah, this is kind of a self-reinforcing thing, right? So each week that I publish something, I get positive feedback, and this propels me forward to keep doing it. When I meet an entrepreneur and he or she tells me that she likes what she has read or that she has used that in her company, that's the best fuel for me to keep doing it. So over time, I have realized that it really works for me, right? So I can give you more concrete examples. So I've written about topics that interest me, like, I don't know, longevity. I
Yeah.
have sourced deals, right? After that post, Juan Cartagena, the founder of Rosita, the longevity coach, approached me and told me, I'm building that. I thought that you were not interested in that. And I also thought that you were investing that early in companies. So, in that particular case, it helped me to source one deal that we ended up doing. In other cases, I think that it might be helpful, when there are some competition in order to win a deal, because we've already seen that in our ecosystem. Sometimes having that kind of advantage or familiarity with the entrepreneur is helpful, and I've seen that happening. So right now I can't stop it because, and it's also a lot of fun. So.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that this kind of openness and transparency brings is public accountability, right? And
Yeah.
once you start doing things or building in the open, you really can't stop because people expect things from you, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these kind of projects, they are fair weather projects, right? When things go well, you're like, okay, I'm gonna write this newsletter. I'm gonna keep writing a blog post every week. I'm gonna do this X, Y, and Z, right? However, when things go wrong, you're still forced to do them, right? Have you encountered any kind of difficulty in still writing the newsletter when something has come up and was difficult to manage, or?
What I've really realized over time is that networks work in the following way. So if you provide a lot of value to a network, you're gonna get it back to you, right? So that's what I try to do. I try to, post interesting stuff in Twitter or, also with the newsletter. And then, since I am kind of giving first or giving, then when I need something from the network, I am receiving it magnified, 1,000 times, right? So it is super helpful, but people don't understand that you have to provide value in order to get value. If you only use a newsletter, your Twitter account, or whatever, just to broadcast what you are doing, if you only speak about yourself, your successes and so on, it doesn't work, right? people is not interested in hearing about you, or there has to be a balance, right? So perhaps you out of 10 tweets, you can tweet 9 interesting things and then one thing about you, your portfolio companies, your fund, whatever. But people are really tired of people just speaking about themselves and so on. So this is the kind of the approach that I'm trying to follow. I try to give value, and then I receive it magnified many times more than I give, right? But that's the way I see it. But it's incredible, because if you are a participant in social networks, you will see that many people don't do it that way, right? They are just speaking about themselves, and then they expect to get something out of the network. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and actually, when we spoke last week in the preparation call, you mentioned that. Well, I don't know if I can share that. Well, I mean, you tell me. But you said that you were getting a little bit too much exposure, that you're inviting so many events and podcasts, that you're getting overexposed to the community, right? And maybe that your message gets diluted. However, there's an incentive to keep doing that, because I don't know about you, but like probably it works very well for you. Every big appearance that you do, it generates more deal flow, or it brings value to your company, or it opens doors to another kind of contacts, whatever, right? So how do you balance that?
It's difficult because, as you said, my feeling is that perhaps I'm doing too much of this stuff, and people could get bored of hearing me talking about stuff. On the other hand, is that balance, right? Of like, one of our priorities as a company is to be top of mind for entrepreneurs, right? So we want to collaborate, to work with the best entrepreneurs, and for that, when they are going to raise money, they have to think about us, right? But it's a balance, right? Too much of a good thing, and I'm not implying that I'm a good thing, but even of the best thing in the world, too much of it could be harmful, right? So I'm trying to find that balance. But one of my projects for this year is getting better at saying no, but it's difficult, right?
I think we're all there. Yeah. I mean, to your point, yeah, I think that we can all become a little bit too much, but the main difference between, I think there are two kinds of speakers, right? The ones that are able to improvise and come without a script, like you and I in this case. So that's why I think that you will never get boring. And the ones that have a script, and those ones are good for 1 or 2 or 3 events, but you know that every time they speak, they have got to say like the very same things, right? And we all know who they are. Like I'm tired of seeing these people in events, right? But that's why, at least, it's also part of the fault is in the interviewer, because if the interviewer doesn't prepare, or ask always the same questions, or ask lazy questions, then you didn't do a great job, I think, right? So in this sense, like, let's talk a little bit more about your newsletter, because I think that's something remarkable, that you write a newsletter that's not, the easy thing for a VC would be to write something about, deals, valuation, rounds, or interesting markets, right? But you write about some things that you find interesting yourself, like you said. I remember one of the last ones I remember was the one about quick commerce, right? I had never known this term. I knew it was out there, but I didn't know the term for it. But it's something that you are interested in. How did the newsletter come about? And right now, how do you manage it inside the company? Is it something that you do on your own?
Yeah, so it started actually with a different format. It started as a compilation of links. So as a curation, the 10, 15 things that I found interesting during the week. I wrote the links, and then a very short summary or comment on why I found that article interesting.
Yeah.
Over time, I realized, and first of all, one major difference is that I wrote that comment in Spanish, right? So because there is a ton of quality content in English, but it isn't that easy to find quality content in Spanish still. So
I agree.
I got some positive feedback about that. Then that comment started taking more space in the newsletter, and in the end, it became, it ended up being the newsletter. So I forgot about links, and just I ended up writing an article each week. I think the way I've been able to do this for 83, 84 weeks right now is because I write for myself. So I'm when I write, I'm not trying to, sound intelligent, sound interesting, win deals, whatever. I write. This is kind of my notebook, right? So I have from time to time, I have a polemic intervention in Twitter in which I say I don't take any notes in meetings, or I don't use any system to keep track of information. Even though I wrote about Rome Research, which is a note-taking app, you could say, I don't take notes. So actually, my newsletter or my blog is my way to organize my knowledge in a sense, right? So one of the things I said, so I keep doing it because I enjoy doing it, and because it's for me. Otherwise, if it felt like work, I think it's not possible to keep it for that long. Another thing you mentioned that I would like to also to raise. You mentioned the article about quick commerce, and actually I didn't write that article because from time to time I invite people to write as guests.
You're right. I was going to go into that in the next. Now you got guest writers.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that post was written by David Alonso, which is the launch manager of Dija here in Spain.
Yeah, I was going to go into that. I mean, the fact that the newsletter has become so popular that now you got guest writers, right? Which is something that we usually don't see in newsletters. So I don't know, just very quick if you got some thoughts on that. But
Sure. For once, these people are able to write and to talk about topics much better than I am, right? So, or they are able to bring perspectives or topics which are, I try to be, how to say this, original. For instance, Azahara wrote about the penalty for motherhood, right? So I try to raise also important topics or uncomfortable topics to the table, and I try to bring the best person to talk about those topics. Also, for some of these people have audiences and networks bigger than mine, right? But in other cases, for me, it's also a very humble way, right, to pay it forward. Like I see like young people doing interesting things, and I want to bring them into the spotlight. Right. For instance, and I don't want to sound like pretentious or nothing, but for instance, last week, Miquel Artero wrote a super interesting article, which has been super successful. And perhaps Miquel wasn't that known, right? So I'm also trying to, people that are doing amazing things, but they are young and they don't have yet an audience. I try also to help them be more known in the ecosystem and so on. So it's a mix of things, and also, of course, and I cannot forget it. It gives me also some breath, right? Like I can rest for 1 week without writing. Sometimes it's super good because I have some personal commitments, job commitments, or also because I am, as I'm doing now, preparing something which requires longer, right? So it's super helpful for me to have some more time to do that.
And that's very generous. Actually, I can relate to that because one of the things that, 1 year ago, we launched the MarsBased podcast. And I have been interviewing and having conversations with people that are perhaps not so famous, not so well known. They don't have an audience. And that sadly, they wouldn't sell any or not a lot of tickets in an event of Startup Grind. And I said, but I want to interview these people. I want to talk to these people. I want to give them an audience, right? And so I understand that. However, there's one thing that I really don't understand from what you said, right? Or maybe I don't share, because I remember when I started reading these guest newsletters, my first reaction was like, but I'm subscribed to this newsletter to read how Samuel thinks, right? And I'm getting stuff from other people, and so I don't know. I find them less interesting in the sense that like they look much more professional in this. Maybe professional is not the right word. Sorry, it's more. Your content is much more organic and comes from the heart in the sense because you're pouring your heart out there. Whereas these people, maybe they over prepare, for your
Yeah.
audience, right? So I don't know if
Yeah.
that's kind of like diluting your message. And do these kind of issues perform better or worse than the regular ones?
I would say they tend to perform average or better than average,
All
right?
right, that's interesting.
Also, for me, when I invite someone with an audience, it helps me bring their audience
Their
into
audience, correct?
mine, right? This is kind of also a win-win deal in those cases.
Yeah.
I get what you say, but not so sure they are prepared, or in some cases it might be, but um, I think, of course, you might be more used to my tone, my voice, whatever, and when you are reading someone else in
Yeah.
under my roof, it might be a little bit confusing. But I think in general, I get super good feedback in the sense that it enriches kind of the experience. And also, my job there is sometimes my job is to write about something, and other times my job is to find those, hidden diamonds and bring into light, right? So
The diamonds in the rough. Yeah,
yeah,
totally. Actually, and circling back to the strategy of your VC firm, right? One thing that we
yeah,
have seen in the recent years is that VCs started hiring people not coming from traditional VC or banking,
yeah, hmm,
right? And in your case, you hired Ivan. There's K Fund that hired Jaime. There's the guys from Draper Esprit. They had Oli, which was super active on community building, and they have
hmm.
a very different perspective on things. Why do you think this is happening? Is it because VCs? There's so much competition right now that VCs need to stand out by having somebody publicly active on Twitter, social media / traditional media, or is it because the role of these people can give also a diverse point of view inside the company?
Both things probably. So if you're a journalist actually and you are researching something, so first of all, there is this super famous guy whose name I have just forgotten, Sequoia, who was formerly a journalist. He's uh, super famous, and actually, there are several examples, several instances in which journalists have become really successful VCs. And I think
Yeah.
it's because the job has some similarities in which you have to research a topic, right? You have at the beginning, you have very small information, then you have to research and make a kind of a case about it. So there might be something about that. Also, and this is more perhaps more the case of Jaime. Jaime, as a former journalist, he knows very well how to approach the press, right? And one of the
Correct.
values a VC can provide is to provide visibility to the company they have invested in, right? So one of the things that when a VC invests in a company is not just the money, but one of the tangible values is some kind of validation, right? Which might be helpful in order to hire people, to attract further capital, and so on. So when someone invests in a company, it's sometimes, not all the times, but many times it's useful to make some noise, right? So if you have that knowledge in your house, like Jaime does, or other guys in other funds, that's useful. I think that's really useful. And on top of that, but as said before, Jaime, before joining K Fund, he displayed that he's like super interested in startups. I think
Correct.
that's
Yeah.
the most important thing for us when we hired someone. Same case for Ivan, is that you have to take some risks, because this is not the best market in the world, right? So there are many other ways to make money better than working around the startup. So if someone is like taking the leap, taking some risks because he really is interested in helping founders build stuff, that's what excites us, right? And we saw that very clearly with Ivan and the work that he was doing with startup riders, and that he's still doing. And I think that was also the case with Jaime, right? So he wrote about startups for a long time before joining K Fund.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the clear case of Sequoia, but I think like if one of the reasons why the tech scene went boom at least 20 years ago in the United States, I think from my humble perspective, is that they started hiring people from non-conventional
Yeah.
degrees or even backgrounds, right? And they wanted somebody to be in charge of communication, and they would bring in a journalist or a writer or an artist, right? And that happened the time around when Google started. And so they kind of like, they ended with what we call the titulitis, right, around here. However, in Spain, this is still not like, it's kind of like you see it in one company. It's more the exception than the rule. Do you think this is going to happen anytime soon, or are we just daydreaming here?
I think this is not, this doesn't happen only in our sector, right? It happens
Yeah.
in everywhere else in the economy. In the UK, for instance, if you work at a hedge fund, you can hire a musician, a violin player. I've seen that. In Spain, it's much more common what you said, like hiring people who has followed like the traditional route, right? I don't know if that's gonna change. I have no idea, but in our case, if you are investing in companies which by definition do unconventional things, you have to bring into your thinking process unconventional people, right? So I think super important.
Is this part also of the strategy of getting earlier and earlier in deals? Let me give some context here, right?
Yeah.
I think there's like a very huge competition, fierce competition in VCs, and whereas before a Series A plus VC would be like, yeah, just introduce me companies who want to raise a Series A. Nowadays they're like, we will only invest in Series A, but please let us know in early seed, right, or even pre-seed. We want to talk to them right away, right? This was something unthinkable 20 years ago, but now it's more and more the case. Why do you think that happens? Is it because like this fierce competition, or?
It could be several things. Competition for sure. So we are seeing international funds like being really comfortable investing in Spain, and they dare to do it like earlier and earlier. So that puts some pressure on us, on the local funds, right? Or the funds pursuing a geographical focus. That's one thing. In our particular case, I believe that the more we do this, the more comfortable we are like taking that super early risk. And also we are kind of more in love with building companies and so on. And we believe that we can be more helpful and take that with a huge grain of salt because, if we are helpful or not, the jury is still out, right? But we feel more comfortable with that super early company building risk. So that's why we are investing earlier and earlier with each fund in our particular case. And also, there is also that point of the competition.
What kind of relationship have you got with international VCs, and how can you audit that from the perspective of an entrepreneur, right? Because one of the things that we usually say is like you got to double check or reference check the VC, right? Because they will be doing that to you. But one of the things that are really relevant when you get money from a VC is what kind of international connections have they got in order to have the follow-on rounds, right? So what was it like in your case?
Well, in our case, we've been around for more than 10 years. We've invested in more than 50 companies. We are right now investing out of our Fund 3. And I said over the years, we have invested in some really successful companies. That means that investing from a small fund like ours, we have co-invested with some of the biggest players out there, both in Europe and in the US. So this is VC is a carrera de relevos. It's not a lonely job, right? It's like a collaboration. It's kind of so it's a huge part of our job, right? One of the tangible ways in which we can add value to our companies is to help them land a really good Series A, Series B round with some really good international investors, right? So this is something we really care about, and something that we've been lucky to do in the past, and we plan to do in the future as well.
Somebody mentions in our chat that were you talking about Benedict Evans? when you were mentioning about the journalist who joined a VC. Was that the case, or?
No, well, I think Ben Evans is not a journalist, but an analyst. So he was a former consultant and he joined Andreessen, not Sequoia. If someone is curious, I can I can find out, but.
I mean, in recent Horowitz, they've always been like super media friendly, and even more so now that they're going full on with the content based strategy, right? I mean,
it's Michael Moritz. Michael Moritz is the person I was referring to. Yeah, actually, Andreessen, I think they are, 5-10 years ahead of the competition in many things, but they said since day one, we are a media company which monetizes via venture fund, right? And it's amazing. So they realized many years ago that being good at media is super important for being good at VC. On the other hand, you have other players which are like super stealth, like Benchmark. Right. They don't even have a website, right? And they are one of the most successful investors right there. So this is something that I see in so many places. Like one strategy works and the complete opposite strategy also works, right? You have to find the one which suits your personality better, and that's the most important thing in life, like finding your style, finding your way of doing things, because many of those things work, but if you are authentic, right, if they kind of suit your way of seeing the world, if you are like this and you're trying to act like that, it's not gonna work. You have to find your DNA. But we've seen that it's really funny. It's like I was talking to my friends here, to my colleagues before. There is a meme which I really love. It's this EQ curve in which you find like really stupid people on one end and really clever people on the other end. And very often they do the same things, right? And in the middle of the curve, you find the normal people, which usually do like super complicated things, but that don't work, right? Like super funny.
Is this an XKCD comic or?
No, it's actually a meme that.
All right.
I'm pretty sure you've seen it. So anyway, I will tweet it to you later to you.
No worries. Sounded like an XKCD comic. Now that you mentioned A16Z, right? Some recent Horowitz. For our audience, what do you think of Clubhouse? Like, is it dead already, or will it come back because they've got so many millions in the bank now?
Well, it's super.
You were very bullish on Clubhouse.
I was.
But not anymore.
Not sure. So these things are only obvious in hindsight, right? Mm-hmm. So right now it seems like the curve is like super depressed, but who knows? What's going to happen in some years? It's true that over time I've realized that discovering like good content there is really complicated, and I think that's the biggest challenge of the platform. Right, because to join an interesting conversation is not easy. So discovery is probably happening in other places like Twitter, and then Twitter have launched their own thing, right, with Spaces. So it's going to be a tough competition. But they will probably make something useful. I don't know. I don't like to be bearish on things, right? I prefer to cheer for them to succeed, and if they don't, it will be a pity. But I don't like to sound pessimistic about any company because everyone is fighting so hard, even then with millions or whatever. But millions also come with pressure and.
Oh no, actually, I was gonna say that I remember when it launched, and for a couple of weeks, it was very brief period of time. Every second tweet on my Twitter timeline was, "Hey, join my Clubhouse," whatever, right? And now it seems like people are pretty ashamed of doing it, or like they're not hosting it anymore. And what I want to have your vision on this. What it looked like their strategy was to launch iOS only, so that they could have some more sophisticated people, right? And because there's no reason to launch with only one of the operating systems on mobile nowadays, because of the prices have dropped and everything. They only launched that. However, in a matter of a month or something like that, the platform was flooded with coaches and motivational people get rich fast and this kind of horrible content. And so maybe the trade-off between quality and quantity fire back, right? What's your vision on what happened on Clubhouse?
Well, I think the strategy to launch only in iOS, at least the official version, is that there were some engineering challenges there, because I'm not, even though I'm an engineer, but I have forgotten so many things. I'm not confident enough to tell this, but supposedly it was kind of an interesting challenge, to host those live conversations or whatever. So they decided to focus on just one platform. And if you remember, this is not uncommon. This is the strategy that, for instance, Instagram followed.
Yeah, but that was 10 years ago or 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So back then, there was no hybrid mobile development. And so that's why I say, like, technologically speaking, at least from my point of view, from developing, it's like that didn't make sense in 2021 or 2020.
But it's not. I don't think it's the development of the app, but of the backbone of the. But still, I don't know, with content delivery networks or the cloud. I don't know if you can. Gotcha. No idea actually. On the other thing, it seemed there is whenever there is a new network, there is a gold rush, right? To gain an audience there, and as you said, Clubhouse was very quickly populated with these snake oil sellers, right? On the other hand, you had also Elon Musk talking live to the founder of Robinhood, and I think some really amazing things also happened there. And I'm pretty sure we will witness more of those in the future, right? But it's difficult.
Actually, I think with Elon Musk and well, I mean, it happened with a couple of times, right? But it looked like a little bit staged, right? But I mean, Elon Musk has got always a very good relationship with A16Z, so it was probably something. I'm not buying that was spontaneous. Like, I was there, I was like, no, this is not spontaneous. But anyways, that's just an opinion. Look, actually, we got a couple of questions coming from the audience. I think it's a great turning point in the conversation. Before we go into another separate topic that I want to talk to you about, one of them is, how do you see the transition from entrepreneur to VC? Like, for those people who are considering moving on from creating startups and they're like, I'm done with this shit. Like, it's too much for the body. Now I want to go for VC. Like, is the grass greener on the other side?
I think it's very different. It's there are many examples of super successful entrepreneurs turned VC. You have also examples of career VCs, so people that were never entrepreneurs before, and you can, as we said, I think this is another example of what we said before, right? Like, super different things, super different strategies succeeding. If you are like a super hands-on person, you love to be on top of things, perhaps VC will not be your thing, because this is more an analytical role, from the sidelines role. There is a transition there. I think, to be super open and super transparent with you, I think that entrepreneurs, when they raise capital, they overrate the empathy that a former entrepreneur might have for them. I don't think you need to be a former entrepreneur to understand the difficulties and the ups and downs that the entrepreneur is going through. But that's an advantage. That could be an advantage for sourcing deals. At the same time, you might be an expert have a super deep expertise in one field, but our job actually is to be experts in nothing, right? And to have knowledge of many things and to connect the dots and so on. So for me, it's not a super clear transition in the way that you can be, of course, successful because how the sausage is made, right? How things work within a startup, and you can be super helpful in many things. It's not a guarantee of success. Of course, it's not a guarantee of failure, right? I think it's interesting to see. It's not the same to have worked in a startup which wasn't that successful or having worked at a rocket ship, right? I think that's really useful to see how a really super high growth company works. That's an experience that could be really helpful as a VC.
Let's talk about another thing. Like we were kind of like sliding over it, but we didn't quite get into it, which is the openness on social media, right? One of the things that I like about your profile is like you're super transparent about like you're sharing both work and personal, and you're pretty open about what you like in terms of music or what your personal interests are and whatnot. How did this come about, and was it ever a threat to your LPs or whatever? Like, I'm not saying like you barely ever post something very controversial, right? But have you gotten any kind of warning anytime from like, hey, you're sharing too much personal stuff or something, or?
No, not at all. No, 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 no. As you said, I share personal things, but I try not
Yeah.
to tweet about politics or I don't know,
You,
religion or
all right. No, I mean you try not to, because we've seen the case of other VCs in Spain that are very active
yeah.
in the politics scene. Like I didn't want to go into that, but like let's talk about this, right? So talking about politics, I like one of the things that I know, like you barely ever post about politics, and if so, it's like once per year, right? So it's not very
Yeah,
intrusive in the things
it's
that you
it's a
do.
super, my newsletter is called Suma Positiva, Positive Sum. And I think that
Yeah.
the politics right now is exactly the opposite. This is a super divisive thing, right? Rather than trying to build something together, they are trying to,
When has it been any different? Like,
yeah,
when
I don't
has it
know,
been any
perhaps
different?
never, right?
I don't remember it. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's not that, of course, I have my opinions on, but it's not something I'm like, I don't know. I think if you follow me for other things, not to hear my opinions on politics, right? So
yeah.
even though, yeah, as you said before, I think you have to show your true self and share what you're passionate about and so on. But some topics are like so divisive, so subjective that I prefer not to touch them.
But then, in the spirit of transparency, right, that we were discussing before, like perhaps I'd rather know what your views on certain subjects are if I'm gonna
Yeah,
be tied to your money. I don't know.
yeah,
I'm thinking out loud here. So
yeah,
I know what the color in politics for other people's other VCs, especially in Madrid, are, because they're super open about it and
yeah,
very motherfucking intense, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But maybe I'd rather want to know that than just discover it down the line. I don't know.
yeah. Um, you could ask for once, right? So if
Yeah,
you ask me in
correct.
private, I could answer you.
Not gonna ask now.
Uh,
Don't worry.
no, no, you could even ask right now. It's not a
Yeah, yeah,
problem. But as said, I believe that in the end, what matters are the persons, right? It's the same like when you choose there is a saying that when you
yeah.
choose an investor, you are choosing the person, not the firm. It's the same like this. So even though you think exactly the opposite of what I think about politics, I think we still should be able to collaborate together
Oh,
because
correct. Yeah, 100%.
yeah. So you know, if we are doing it right, so in politics there are no blacks and whites, everything is gray. If
Yeah,
something was obvious, it should have been solved many years ago, right? Everything is
yeah.
like super complicated and there are every kinds of trade-offs. So I'm pretty sure you are not right and I'm not right either. So
Yeah.
why don't let's take that to the side and build something together. That's my view.
Yeah, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I, for one, I am also very active on Twitter for politics, right? And political inclinations are very on the clear. And but throughout the years, a lot of people have mentioned like, hey, aren't you worried that this will affect your deal flow as a CEO of a company, right? And you're doing services, and you might have clients here and there. And we do have clients in Madrid, for instance. I'm like very open about the independence, being pro-independence, right? But like, and they don't care. But like, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is like, maybe this loses me some clients, but wins me other clients, right? So that's why I think it's very interesting how polarized these are.
Definitely. And you know what? So I'm super interested in debating ideas and things, and I'd love to debate with you about your views on that. But the problem is that many people are not interested in debating ideas. They take it like super personal, right? And,
especially on Twitter.
Yeah, well, in Twitter is over time, and as your audience grows, you realize that one of the worst things you can do with your time is to reply to tweets. You can, I don't know if it's sad or not, but that's a little bit my experience. It's not, usually it's not a constructive thing. It develops in something like a super destructive, like really quickly, because it's really hard to have an argument, in 280 characters or whatever. I'm the same. So, yeah, I do agree that it's a little bit risky business to, express your political opinions. Like, but if that's you, that's what you should. If for you that's like something like super, 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 super important, I think you're doing well. Like showing as you are.
Yeah,
authenticity is super important, and
yeah, it is. And like the funny thing is that like over the years, I've only gotten complaints from VCs, especially from Madrid. They're like, dude, you're too intense, or like, why are you sharing this? It's like, why do you care? You're not my client. You cannot tell me to shut up, right? But anyways, but on the same top, like by the same token, maybe that's something like politics is something you don't open up that much on social media when you're starting out because your company is at risk. But once you gain a position of power, you start being more open about certain things. Like for instance, also. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So I only tweet about politics when there is something that I really find, I don't know, super disgusting, for a better word. So, for instance, when Vox did this campaign using the menas, this. I found that super disgusting, and I tweeted against that, for instance, right? So there are some times in which I cannot bite my tongue and I have to say something, but then most of the times I regret it afterwards, but you cannot help yourself sometimes.
No, I 100% I agree with that. You also like shared something in one of the latest podcasts. I think it was in the podcast of Novicap. You talked publicly about the use of hallucination. I don't even know the right word for that. Is that something that you would have spoken about when you were starting the fund, or you're doing it now because you're in a pretty comfortable position?
No, I think since day one, I've been super free to speak my mind about any topic. And if you are a VC and you are not open-minded to talk about drugs or whatever, I think you are in the wrong spot, right? So we are hearing all day, really, we are really grateful for that. Really like crazy ideas and super unconventional things. So if something is, I said, I love to talk about ideas, and if something is a taboo, or I'm super interested in hearing why is that, and
It's weird because I remember when we interviewed Carlos Blanco 2018, he said something like, I would never invest. I would even do drug tests to people. And then I was like, dude, if you really did that, like literally everybody I know in the startup scene in Barcelona takes drugs. So like you wouldn't have invested in any company, right? Maybe I'm over exaggerating here, but it's true. Like I'm not only talking about the hallucination effects or drugs. Is there any other like red flag that you wouldn't consider as a VC? Is there like one one red line we shouldn't be stepping over when we are pitching?
But you mean investing, or if we?
Yeah, I'm not like it's something like if what kind of people you don't invest in? Because
Oh,
like the drugs thing is not like something you find out like really quickly, but like solo founders or what kind of.
no, of course, there are some urban legends sometimes. Actually, by
Yeah,
the way, 2 weeks ago, I wrote about those things that which are like common knowledge. You shouldn't invest in solo founders. You shouldn't invest in marriages. And then you
yeah,
look at the data and you find out that there are like many unicorns founded by, well, not many, but at least a decent amount founded by marriages or by solo founders. And so
yeah.
that was a mind opener for me. No, I think we try to be like super open-minded, and there are no red flags in terms of what you think, what you do, um, at least consciously. Of course, then there are a lot of biases that operate unconsciously, right? Um, but no, I wouldn't say. One thing that perhaps this is not linked to the founder, but to the company, and we are not an impact fund, but in the sense that for me, the default case is that all startups have positive impact. But when we invest in a company, I always ask to myself, if this company succeeds, do I believe this is positive, net positive for the world or not? And in some cases, I prefer to pass, right?
Correct. Actually, on the subject of drugs, I read a really good book last year. It's called "Stealing the Fire,"
Mm-hmm.
and it literally tells you that Google, like wouldn't be Google if it were not
Mm-hmm.
for Burning Man and whatever happened to Burning Man. Right? Take it as you will. A couple more questions from the audience, and we will wrap it up. So the first one is like, and that's pretty interesting because I don't know it myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's asking, "What's your opinion on Beyond Deck?" Are you familiar with
Be
them?
on deck. Yes, I know
'Cause
them.
I still don't
Actually,
understand what they do.
well, it's I actually had this conversation, I think, yesterday, the day
Oh,
before.
really?
It's funny because Eric Torenberg, the founder, he's a Kaufman fellow like myself, and he's class 23. I'm class 24. So
All right.
uh, and I kind of know him personally.
Okay.
Um, Not so sure what I do. I think they are trying to export the Y Combinator model to other things which are not startups, but to creators, investors. Like they are providing you with some knowledge, some network, and some capital, right? Like helping you launch your thing. Your, I think they have a program for new VCs, new investors, or they have a program for writers or something like that. So I think they are kind of trying to apply that Y Combinator model to other verticals. What I know, of course, and this is what everyone else knows, is that they are growing like crazy, like hiring super talented people like Gons, the writer of C Table here in,
Yeah.
uh, for instance. I know what they are doing, but they seem to be good so far. They raised capital also from really smart people, like I think from Founders Fund or
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, they're it's very polarized because on the one hand they're hiring super talented people, on the other hand they're hiring a lot of the so-called hustlers and these
Yeah.
people who post like really haiku theme posts on LinkedIn, and
Okay.
you never understood what they do. Like you would never hire them for your company. So it's like that's why I'm not understanding what they're really doing at the Beyond Deck. But anyways,
Mhm.
that was a question coming from the audience. Let's take the last one, which would be, what is a quality or trait that you look for and value more in founders than other investors? Like, what do you value differently from other VC funds?
Wow. I don't know what I definitely value a lot is resourcefulness. And this is
Yeah,
a difficult
that's a good
word in
one.
English. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
like the ability to, to overcome difficulties, whatever however they come, whatever they are. Um, I think that's something I've seen in the best founders we've got in the portfolio.
okay.
There's no problem big enough for them to to find a solution.
Okay, we have 5 more minutes. I think we can take a couple more. First of all, is What are the? Yeah, that's a very interesting one. Maybe that requires a long answer, but we'll not have a lot of time for that. Is that smaller local funds they face very complex competition from international VCs with deeper pockets, right? What would be a good tactic for them to sort of have these access to early stage deals and how to be competitive?
Super interesting, and this is something that we think a lot about, right? Because it's a super important threat for us. One thing, I think COVID has taken down, the geography barriers, right? So we are super comfortable doing deals over Zoom, but I think when things go back to normal, being close to people is gonna be still an important thing, and more important than geographical distance is cultural distance. Sorry.
Okay.
Sometimes, when I speak to someone from here, from Barcelona, from Madrid, from Valencia, from Huesca, from wherever, we have a cultural proximity that helps me gauge better if that person has better chances to build a great company or not. When you are evaluating a person with a super different culture from yours, that's very, very difficult, right? Or also in terms of communication, that here in general in Southern Europe, we tend to be bad at selling ourselves, at least compared with the Anglo-Saxons, with the people from the Nordics, right? And this is something we try to help our entrepreneurs with. We try to make them aware of that, to prepare them for that, to teach them how to pitch, right? So I think there are still some cultural differences that a local investor might be super helpful with, right? Or there are other more tactical things like, your local investor knows better how regulatory things or how the talent market works in your country, whatever. But those for me are minor things, but the cultural thing, I think this is something which is very often forgotten, but nonetheless super important.
Great. And the last question, we're going to wrap this up with our signature question. Everybody gets this question to start, Brian. It's probably the most complex question that you will have been asked. It's everybody has got a useless superpower, something that you do exceptionally well, but it's fucking useless. What is yours?
Wow. I wouldn't say that, well, it's neither useless nor I do it like super well, but playing guitar is kind of my
No. You can do better than that. You can do better than that. No. Like, think of it like something like, you park your car and after walking 100 meters from it, you're like, did I lock the car? And go back to check it every time. That would be a useless superpower. But playing guitar is nice.
That's not useless, what you said.
I mean, if it happens every time, like it happens to me every time, for instance, it's like, I know I've locked the car, but I will just go back and check it every time.
No idea, man. This is so complicated. No idea. I have to come up with a better answer for next time.
All right. Okay. Since we didn't get to talk about, like, I had 10 more questions, but like obviously we don't have time for that. But I'll let you part with this one. Like, what are the best, like the 5 metal albums that you would recommend to our people, or like, a couple metal albums that you recommend? Because we didn't talk about metal.
Okay. I really love a Swedish band called Ghost. I recommend you to hear their album Meliora. I think it's not the last one, but the previous one. Mastodon, Crack the Sky. It's definitely a great album. What else?
Can also be punk, because I remember that you once posted that you were listening to Rise Against. I was like, I like this guy.
Rise Against, super great band. And lately I was even listening to the last one of Lamb of God, which goes with their name, which is a great album, more extreme than the other ones. Well, even though Mastodon is also a bit not for everyone.
Yeah.
I really like them. And last one, Dream Theater, Images and Words.
Wow, that's a
A
good selection
super
there.
classical one, yeah. Yeah.
Are people surprised when you tell them that you're into metal, or
Yeah, I don't know. Could be.
you never had long hair, and or maybe you will surprise me when
No,
you
no, no,
had.
no, no. Never, 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 never.
All right, I think we can wrap it up here. Any last parting words? 30 seconds to say what's going on in JME Ventures. How can we help you? And then we're out.
If you are raising money here and you're based here in Spain and you would like to work with us, we are more than open and we love to hear from you. You can check our website and drop us an email, or more than happy to work with you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Samuel, for your generosity and your time. It's been fantastic. I've got the feeling that we'll talk again once my voice is back to normal. And thank you, everybody, for being here.